Picture waiting for a decision that could change everything. Not bad news? No news. A contract sits with the client's board for 11 days, no update, no timeline, just silence. And you watch yourself come quietly unglued. You refresh your inbox like a lab rat at a lever. You reread the proposal hunting for the fatal flaw you must have missed. And by day 8, here's the strange part. You catch yourself half hoping they'll just say no. Because a no you could work with. A no has edges. When the yes finally lands, the relief teaches you something you didn't want to know. Those 11 days of maybe cost more sleep, more focus, more cortisol than any actual rejection all year. Nothing bad had happened. The not knowing was the bad thing. Now you might assume that's a personal weakness, a failure of nerve. It isn't. It's a design feature. And once you understand the mechanism, it explains an astonishing amount of human misery and a great deal of bad decision-making. So let's get under the bonnet. In 2016, a team at University College London, led by Archie de Burke, published a study in Nature Communications that put a number on exactly this feeling. Volunteers played a simple game: turn over rocks on a screen. Some rocks had snakes underneath, and a snake meant a mild electric shock. All the while, the researchers tracked stress, skin conductance, pupil dilation, self-report, while an algorithm quietly varied how predictable those snakes were. Here's the finding that deserves to be far more famous than it is. Stress did not peak when a shock was certain. It peaked when the odds were around 50-50. Maximum uncertainty, knowing you would definitely be shocked, was measurably less stressful than a coin flip chance of the very same shock. Read that again. The organism would rather face certain pain than an uncertain maybe. And there was a second finding tucked inside, and this one's the redemptive part. The people whose stress tracked the uncertainty most accurately also performed better at the game. So, the stress wasn't a malfunction. It was information. The feeling of a brain correctly flagging where its model of the world was weakest. To see why maybe outranks definitely bad on the threat scale, you have to grasp what your brain actually does all day. It doesn't sit there passively receiving the world, it predicts the world, constantly, compulsively, and it uses incoming data mostly to check its own forecasts. That's how a slow, expensive organ stays ahead of a fast environment. Anticipate the danger, preposition the resources, act before the event. So, what is uncertainty mechanically? It's the failure state of that entire system. An unpredictable environment means the brain can't preposition anything. So it does the only rational thing left to it. It treats the unknown itself as the threat, and it holds the alarm systems on standby, indefinitely. That's the 11-day inbox vigil. Nothing was wrong. The brain simply couldn't verify that nothing was wrong. And to ancient circuitry, unverified is indistinguishable from unsafe. Psychologists have a name for the trait version of this. They call it intolerance of uncertainty. How much distress not knowing causes you, and how much you'll sacrifice to make it stop. The researcher R. Nicholas Carlton has argued that fear of the unknown may be the fundamental fear sitting underneath all the others, and the clinical evidence takes it seriously. Work by Michel Dugas and colleagues has shown that intolerance of uncertainty is a core engine of chronic worry. And here's their reframe, which I love. Worry, in their analysis, isn't a malfunction. It's a strategy. The worrier isn't enjoying the spiral. They're using mental rehearsal of every possible outcome to manufacture a feeling of preparedness. Worry is what reaching for certainty looks like when no certainty is actually available. Now here's where this stops being an anxiety story and becomes a decision-making story. Because a brain that hates uncertainty doesn't just suffer quietly, it pays to make the suffering stop. And the currency it pays in is usually the quality of your decisions. Let me give you 4 taxes worth knowing by name. The first is premature closure. Under uncertainty, any answer feels better than no answer. So you grab the first plausible one and you stop looking. You hire the mediocre candidate because the search became unbearable. You accept the first diagnosis, the first offer, the first explanation. The decision ends the discomfort. That's what it was for. Whether it was actually right becomes tomorrow's problem. The second is the opposite failure, paralysis and the certainty mirage, refusing to move until you're sure. One more analysis, one more opinion, one more quarter of data. But in most real decisions, certainty never arrives. So waiting until I'm sure is just deciding not to decide, while feeling responsible about it. And meanwhile, the option ages, the competitor moves, the house sells to someone else. The third is paying the certainty premium. People will accept objectively worse outcomes in exchange for predictability. The dead-end job kept for years over the promising leap. The known bad relationship over the unknown alone. Behavioral economists find versions of this everywhere. We don't maximize outcomes. We minimize maybes. And the fourth, the most insidious of the lot, is story grabbing. An uncertainty-starved brain fills the information gap with invented certainty. And it's almost always threat-flavored. The silent director is planning your exit. The unanswered text is a verdict. This is where intolerance of uncertainty shakes hands with the classic thinking errors, mind-reading, fortune-telling, catastrophizing, because at bottom, all 3 are counterfeit certainty. The brain forging the answer it can't obtain. Look at those 4 together and notice the shared structure. In every single case, the decision is being optimized to end the feeling of not knowing, rather than to produce a good outcome. The discomfort has quietly replaced the goal. That's the whole trick. So what do you do about it? The self-help instinct here is to hunt for calm, to find some clever technique that makes uncertainty stop feeling bad. I want to argue for something more honest. It will always feel bad because the feeling is your predictive machinery working properly. The trainable skill isn't eliminating the discomfort. It's raising your tolerance, widening the gap between feeling the uncertainty and paying to make it stop. And this matters because intolerance of uncertainty behaves like a fitness level, not a fixed trait. The clinical work by Dugas's group treats it exactly that way. Successful therapy for chronic worriers targets the intolerance itself, deliberately practicing exposure to not knowing. And the worry recedes as the tolerance grows. You don't drain the ocean, you get better at swimming. Underneath the skill, though, sits a belief worth dragging into the light. People with low tolerance almost always carry some version of "I cannot cope unless I know." It's a limiting belief masquerading as prudence, usually installed during a period of life when unpredictability genuinely was dangerous. And beliefs like that don't yield to argument. They yield to contrary evidence gathered deliberately. Every "maybe you survive on purpose" is one more entry in the file. So here's the drill. Borrowed in spirit from the clinical protocols and shrunk to civilian size. Once a day, for 2 weeks, choose a small uncertainty on purpose and don't resolve it. The menu is everywhere once you look. Order something unfamiliar without Googling it first. Send the email and don't check for a reply for 4 hours. Just sit in the not knowing. Let someone else pick the film, the route, the restaurant, and ask no questions. Make one small, low-stakes decision at 70% information and notice the urge for the other 30. Leave a question you're itching to look up unanswered until tomorrow. 2 rules turn this into training rather than a quirk. First, name the moment. When the discomfort spikes, say inwardly, "This is uncertainty, not danger." My prediction engine complaining, not a threat report. You're teaching the interpretation layer. You're not suppressing the signal. Second, log the outcome. Each evening, 1 line. What was the maybe? How loud was the discomfort? 1 to 10. And what actually happened within a fortnight? You'll own a private data set with a comically consistent finding. The discomfort averaged about a 6. The outcomes averaged fine. And that data set, not affirmations, not reassurance, is what recalibrates the machinery. The prize is bigger than comfort, because every genuinely valuable thing in your life sits on the far side of a maybe. The pitch, the move, the conversation, the launch. People who need certainty first don't get certainty. They get smallness, because certainty first is a bid your life simply can't accept. The work here isn't learning to love the fog. It's learning that you can navigate in it, and that the voice screaming for the fog to lift first was never going to be satisfied anyway. 11 days of silence teach you what that UCL study measured. The maybe hurts more than the no. But the maybe is where everything gets decided, so you might as well train for it. If that landed, do one thing for me. Join the Rebuild newsletter, where I go deeper into the mechanics of change, one practical idea at a time. This episode was narrated by an AI clone of my own voice, trained on this show.